Hello folks, today I'm going to present a very short video regarding event types. There are a few types of events in RPG Maker and these can dramatically impact your game, and it is very important to take into account each of those because the way you set them, they can actually help you or they can actually break your event scripting. Now, I will call it scripting even if you don't write any code specifically and use only the console. So the point to call it is very simple. RPG Maker has three main types of events. They are the so-called, well, I call them map bound events, because these events you just double click on the map anywhere you want, and as long as this button is specifically chosen, and double clicking anywhere on the screen allows you to see an event editor, and you can basically edit it the way you want. RPG Maker does not require you to use any code. If you know, however, and you can use JavaScript, which is specific to RPG Maker MV, you can create your own plugins, or you can use any other person's plugin so long as you don't have conflicting licenses. Now, the event editor is available for each of the event types. However, there are many things to keep into account, and probably I will not present them all, so if I missed something, feel free to tell me and I will make another video about this. So, map bound events. These events are, as their name says, they are bound to the map. So for example, I have an event here that allows the player to open these doors and enter. They will turn back, close the doors, and then face towards the room. So these events, when you put them on a map, they will remain there fixed and they will not change their position unless you change unless you choose so, which is something like, for example, in here, set event, and this event is triggered by a switch. Its location is completely different from the one that it is written here, because I'm using a plugin that allows me to replicate events. So whatever events I will use on multiple maps, I have created a map that will keep my replicated events, and I will simply copy them with an event. It's a blank event that has a command here in the node that says I will copy the event on page, the event on map X and event number Y. Okay, so these events can have an infinite amount of lines. You can put as much writing and commands as you want in here. Now I'm currently working at a new event regarding my theater club. It's the first time I will be mentioning one of the clubs in my events, and actually it takes place in the theater club of my university, in my Japanese university actually. Well, actually, you can people can see that I have made some Japanese writings in here. What you see here, I think it's called Geki Jo, which means theater. And here I have the botanical club, which looks much more beautiful when inside the game. Well, actually, I can actually show it. It has some animations that I made myself. It's basically some cyclic events. So what you see here, these leaves falling, is nothing else but a parallel event in here that is turned on. It doesn't have a switch, so it starts with this page, it moves to this one, so it shows the tree like this. It then goes to the next page because it closes the switch and opens the new one. Actually, first of all you open the switch and then you close the one that was active, and then you have this one. So it goes like this, 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 this. Okay, so map bound events are a bit more intricate because they can be performed a lot of things. Map bound events are also your characters. Any character that you will want, you will create them as an event. You will choose them a picture, for example like this, and they will look something like this, and they will actually be a character. That's basically how you create them. And they will actually have a different mechanic. For example, these events here, they are action buttons. Okay, so in order to trigger them, you have to actually step on them and trigger them, and you can program them in numerous cases. For example, in this case, this event cannot be triggered unless the player is actually facing left. So if you're not facing this direction, you cannot trigger it, because you can only open a door if you face it, let's say somewhat logically. With characters, you cannot step on them, but if you are anywhere near them, you can actually interact with them by pressing the default enter, which means, interact and, dialogue with them. So you can put some dialogues in here, you can put some text, show text boxes, you can write some text, and if the player comes and interacts with the character, they will simply trigger the text. Now, map bound events, as I call them, have a few aspects in here. So first of all, they have an autonomous movement that is peculiar to only these. So if it is fixed, it will only sit in there and basically do nothing. If you choose random, they will move at random, and basically kind of that. If you use approach, it's a very simple idea. It will keep approaching the player. So wherever you put it on the map, it will seek to find the player. It will try to find the player. However, the AI for that is very, very simple. It uses only a basic AI, so it is unable to go beyond walls, to go around walls or even the slightest obstacle. It will always get stuck in different things. If you choose custom, however, you see that the button here, route, becomes available, and when you choose this, you have access to a basic set of movements that you can give your character. For example, through on, through off. Each command comes with a trigger and an end function, just like in HTML. So through, for example, is a function that allows said event to move through any possible obstacle as if it doesn't exist. It's best to use, for example, if you have ghost NPCs, and ghost NPCs also go well with opacity, which shows how, let's see, colorful and how material, let's say, your character is. The more you lower this value, you will make your character more translucid. They will appear a bit more phantomatic. So if, for example, if you want to make a shadow, right, a specter, or a ghost, around the one value that would be the best would be, for example, 120. Okay, blend mode is something that you can also apply to pictures, and out of these I only use normal and multiply. Multiply is best to make your character really translucid, and it kind of looks like a ghost. It's best for pictures if you want to make them very phantomatic, and if you want to have the picture appear like a kind of a memory or something like that. Usually I use full screen pictures for this, and they appear, and they don't in RPG Maker, photos are very annoying because they will appear over most of everything. I usually use full screen pictures, which usually take up all the space, so you can't see the map which will be behind the picture. You can still see the writings, okay, if you write text and the such. So if you use normal, if you use multiply, it will be phantomatic. However, I usually use pictures, big pictures, for busts to show a certain character when they speak, and it looks, in my opinion, it looks quite nice if used on normal. If you use them on multiply for whatever reason, make sure that the colors of the picture do not blend with the background of your map. For example, in this case, if you have a picture that has predominant pink or green, when it becomes phantomatic, it might blend with the map and it will probably not look good. So it is really worth trying to test the picture and see how it will work. Okay, so you can set different points in here. You also have move towards player or move away from player. If you use, it's preferable this custom to be used with plugins, and the only plugin that I use with that is Galv's detection plugin, which does me wonders. It's a plugin that allows to use RPG Maker's advanced AI regarding player detection, which is enabled by the plugin, and it also allows the player to create events that actually chase the player. Like, it's really something annoying. Now, yes, I can simply delete this character. Okay, so I can go here in another map. Okay, so let's see where that map was. Okay, here. It's a map that's called Shizuoka Ken. It means Shizuoka province, and that's somewhat, actually it's something that my game will be based on. So I have these guardian NPC who will be moving around the park, and if the player has certain conditions, like for example is has bloodied clothes, in case you choose to kill someone and you'll sooner or later get, I mean, when you kill someone you get your clothes bloodied, right? So if they have this, it will trigger a self switch. I will be talking about this in another video. So this one was set as a parallel event. In this case you cannot interact with the character, and this one, for example, this page is an event touch. Now, the types of events. Okay, and if you see here, it's a script, Galv detect event. So these actually work only if the condition is true. Okay, so if this event 699, you see, in range 6 detects the player and actually the player is in line of sight. Now, line of sight for events means, in any video game platform that you'll use, it means 180 degrees in front. Okay, so they can see literally from here onward. This one can see from here onward, this one can see from here onward, and again their face, the way they are directing, it's 180 degrees. Now I chose here true because you can only detect the player if you see them in this case. Okay, like you can put false in case you use this plugin, in case you have an event that is hidden and you want to hint the player at its location, and you don't have that event to necessarily see the player. Okay, so for example, let's say you have something that's hidden in here, and when the player passes by, you don't know this event what direction they are facing, and it's not important because probably you want to put some balloon that shows a question mark. So when the player goes around and let's say it moves in range 6, this one will show the balloon so that it draws the player's attention. Okay, now regarding these, this is called event speed. Now this speed is something that will show how fast the event will move if you have it move. Okay, so in this case this is speed 4, which is classified as the normal speed. The speed here is 2 times slower, as it is said. So you have 6 speeds. I wouldn't advise you to use speeds before, I mean including 5 and 6, because they're probably kind of too fast for the player. So unless you do something specific, it's most likely not going to help much. Okay, so frequency is something that will depict how fast each character will move. Now if you see, each map has tiles, so these characters will move from one tile to another based on this frequency. So if you want your character to replicate someone who is crippled and they can barely walk, you can use any frequency, for example 2 or 3, probably 4. If you want a ghost that's slowly approaching the enemy or an ally or the player, you can also use, let's say, frequency 3 or 4. If you want them to move like normal, okay, and as if, right, like a normal moving person, you use frequency 5. Priority is something that shows where they will be placed. RPG Maker has a 3-level tiles, okay, system. The system allows tiles to be put one over the other until you have 3 levels. So it's one over the other over another one, okay? So the first one always goes the lowest. Now in many cases you will want your events to be below characters, which is the default option, because you want your players to actually be capable of stepping over them. When you put characters like these characters of mine are all parallel events, so you cannot interact with them because I chose so, and I've placed them below character because there will be much more than these, and they will keep moving around and around, so the player will be blocked if these characters actually have same as character priority. Okay, so if they are same as character, they will be at the same level, right? So they will be at level 2, and so the player cannot walk over them, so you have to walk around them, which kind of sucks if you are building a big town, like in my case a 256 times 256 map, and it will be quite bad. Okay, you can put things above characters. This is something that can go on well with a different approach. For example, in this case, I don't know if it's around here, so you can put parts of a tile, okay, like parts from this house, you can put them separately as events, and you can set them as above characters in certain situations. For example, in a situation you may not want the NPC to be able to approach the house, okay, so you can, in that case, you will have to put it same as character, so the character cannot move by the house, okay, like cannot move under here. Okay, in this case, this one here, which actually shows as a roof, has an event that allows the player to knock at the back door of the house. Okay, it will also be hinted, so the player can actually move below these tiles, like moving behind the house and coming here to actually knock at the back of the house. Okay, and with other houses you can just draw them as they are, and in the console you have to find tile sets. You find your tile set which belongs to that, I think it was this. You find the right tile set and you just put it, you just give X's if you want. This is a new tile set and I haven't worked towards it, but I think it was this one probably, or I don't know. Okay, but yes. Okay, so as I was going back to our own school, that's a map that I haven't started yet. Okay, so we have these events. Now these events can have multiple pages, and these pages are actually read in the opposite way, like from the right to the left. Okay, unless they have a specific switch or a self switch, they can only be read from here to here. Okay, so if these ones didn't have a self switch, if you have 2 or more pages, none of your other pages will be read. Only the first one from here will be read, which most likely will be your last page that you have created. Okay, so be very mindful to this, because this can actually hurt. Okay, like you may probably find yourself in a question like, why doesn't the event actually read this page? If you want to specifically read this page, you have to set it a self switch, a switch, or 2 switches. But the way these things work, even if you put 2 switches, if only one of the switches is active, you still trigger the event. So using 2 switches only helps if either of the switches is needed to trigger the event. Okay, if you choose here 2 switches, and they are different of course, only one, as of what I've tested, but this was long ago, only one is needed at least to trigger the event. That is why you'll probably want a self switch, or you will want to choose an actor. Okay, so in this case we have a certain event that will trigger a different page depending on the character that is active. My game will have 5 playable characters, for example Miyumi. Actually this one will be called Dora. Xandara is the test, is only the test one, okay? And these characters, depending on who the main character is, these pages will be triggered, okay? And there will be different events based on that. However, I've given this map up for a long time because I'm only interested now in the school map and the upper one, the upper floors and the roof. So with events, you also have triggers. Actually these are the event types, so keep in mind when you have more pages they are read from the right to the left, except when you have switches and different designations in here. Action button triggers in 2 cases. If you have an event like this on the map, you actually have to step on it and you will use it. If you have switches or buttons, for example, like okay, this one is a very big add-on that I found on the internet, and the person gave it for free to me. So the point is it has a lot of characters. Okay, so now you have these are buttons, and these are also buttons, and when you use these as events, for example like this, okay, this one actually acts as a character, so you don't step on it. You can trigger it from here, 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 or here, okay? You can trigger it from adjacent locations. In RPG Maker, I wouldn't mind if you actually remember that these diagonal squares are also adjacent, because RPG Maker is compatible with Octodirection, okay? So the characters can actually go in all 8 directions. If you can actually see in here, set movement route, either this way or through custom route, it's the same thing, okay? It's basically the same thing, fixed, but I usually go through set movement route, and you actually can see that you have move lower right, lower left, upper right. So you can have characters move in the 8 directions, right, even on the diagonals. However, the characters that you will create through the character creator only have 4 direction facing. If you want the other 4, you will need a lot of plugins for that, but on that probably most likely another day. So if they don't have a picture, okay, and well, it depends. If the picture is set to below characters, even for this switch, you actually have to step on it to trigger it. However, being a switch or a character, I think you don't necessarily have to step on it. Haven't tried it though yet. So with this said, you have action button. Player touch and event touch are almost the same, and there is only one little difference. So player touch means the event will trigger when you actually touch the event. So in this case it's when you actually touch it. So you come this way, and when you touch it, then it will trigger. Or if it is like this, if you step on it, like no, this not in this case, when you step on it, it will trigger, right? It's just like any event in most video games, where you simply go, and when you go through a certain room, different effects occur. They will occur because you have a touch event over there. It might be named differently, but if you remember Fear, for example, First Encounter Assault Recon Prop, I think that was the game, with unknown origin scenes. As you are walking through different rooms, you would have these unknown origin messages and some spooky sounds occurring. So they would only occur when you stepped through a certain part of the room, right? Or it was probably drawn as a line, and when you crossed that line of the room, you would trigger it, okay? So that's an example of a player touch. Now if you will create something like Pac-Man, and you have events that seek the character, and you want them to trigger something when they touch the player, it is better to use event touch instead of player touch, because if you have events that will trigger something when they touch the player. If you choose player touch, they will only trigger if the player touches them. So what does a player touch actually mean? Well, a player touch is when the player is touching those events and they are actually heading towards those. Okay, so let's say that this switch would be chasing me, okay, and it would only act as a touch in RPG Maker if I'm facing it. So if I'm here and I'm facing upwards and this switch comes to me, it will be a touch because I'm chasing it. But if I'm facing downwards or any other direction other than up and this one comes to me, it won't do anything because it is a player touch. I'm not touching it. Okay, if it is event touch, it will trigger when it touches the player. You can also use a plugin to trigger actions when a certain event touches another event, or you can do a mathematical approach by creating some variables to which you assign the x and y position of a character, which is done something like this. You choose a variable, you give it a name. I'll take this one for example, and you go to game data, and in here you choose character and you choose map x, which means the x coordinate of the character. Okay, and you also create another variable, you put it here, and you also choose again map y, so you'll have map y and map x. Then you have to do some little maths and you have to make a difference in between the variables of your event and the player or the other event that you want to trigger when they touch. And you put a conditional, they can only trigger if they have a 0 result. Okay, so the result is 1 or 0, okay, which means that the two are actually one near the other. Okay, like I don't think I have an event like that anymore. I used to have one, but it broke, so I think I deleted it. I think I actually have it in here. Okay, so you have to do something like this, two variables like this, two variables like this, and then you create a sum, right? First of all, if any of the variables will reach 0, okay, first of all you make a difference. Okay, you put the difference, the whatever you call it in English, because it's not coming to my mind. Okay, and through this you actually say that this one will be, I mean, player x minus event x and player y minus event y. You'll say that if the difference is below 0, you will multiply it by -1 because you have coordinates and you cannot have negative coordinates. Okay, so if the difference between these two variables equals 0, okay, actually is equal to or lower than 1, it means the two events actually touch, and then you can go on with whatever event you want, whatever scripts that you want. But basically from here to here is what you have to write. Okay, and then from up till here, from here to here, and then downwards goes whatever you want. Okay, now apart from these two, we have autorun and parallel, which are basically the same, almost. Again, one little difference. If you know about programming, you probably know about threads, or probably you know about threads from computers. So basically a parallel event is an event that works in parallel. Okay, it works separately from other events, and it will just do whatever you tell it, and it will do things and it will repeat them. So if you put here some text, it will keep repeating it again and again and again and again and again. Okay, like indefinitely. So for example, in a parallel event, it would kind of suck to put, for example, a loop in it. You can do that if you want the player to go through a pile of text, for example, or a few functions, and then you introduce a loop and say, as long as the player does not guess the code or something like that, they will remain in the loop, and when they guess the code, they will break the loop and continue on with the event. Why would you want a parallel event? Because a parallel event can be triggered from anywhere on the map, and since it repeats indefinitely, you will want to give it a switch. So you will trigger it through a, let's say, touch event, and you trigger its switch and it will constantly repeat afterwards, and you'll probably want at a certain time to close its switch so that it no longer repeats. Be very mindful that parallel and auto-run events can actually become very resource consuming, and they can create some conflicts. If you use two plugins that do, for example, the same thing, you will most likely end in a very unpleasant lag. At times these events can actually freeze your computer. So be very mindful of these. If you have events, parallel events that you see, a parallel event can repeat itself even 20 times a second. Okay, I mean, depending on how long it is, it can repeat itself a very long time, very many times per second. That is why when you have such events that, for example, you have an event that wants to increase, you want to increase the value of a variable by 1, okay, you don't use a parallel event because it can actually increase you the value of your variable even 20 times in a certain second. How you can do that? You can use a variable. You can take variables, assign one, say add +1, okay, and then you choose wait a frame. 60 frames equal 1 second, okay, so this will repeat, but at least it will wait 1 second, okay. So in a way you kind of have this idea, right? Like, it will increase it +1, then you have a second pass, it will increase it again by 1, we will have another second to pass, okay. If you do this to parallel events, depending on whether you need it or not, it will make them function a lot less, so therefore they will also consume less resources, okay. Also, one thing to remember with these, don't put timers in events, okay. Don't put timers in parallel events or auto-run events, because RPG Maker MV and the previous ones can only hold one timer at any given time, and the loop can actually start more than one instance of a timer, so your timer will never work. It will never work, okay. So you can use it from an action button or an event like this, a player touch or an event touch, and you can trigger it through that, okay. There are plugins for multi-timers, okay, and there are plugins to actually help you with the timers. Feel free to check Yanfly, for example. They have a lot of plugins, and they also have something for this. Good. Now, parallel events will work in parallel and will allow your player to move. However, through testing, I have seen that there is something quite unpleasant. For example, when you go through texts, there is this slight chance that when you have, let's say, text and movement and such, when you have a waiting sequence, throughout that waiting sequence, if you click on the map, your character may, there are very small chances, but your character may actually go to the point you have clicked on the map, and most likely ruin your sequence, especially if your character has to follow a certain move sequence. And if they move to the place where you have clicked them, where you have accidentally clicked or specifically clicked, then probably you will be screwed, because you don't know if you can actually have your character come back to where you clicked them from. And that actually sucks. In order to prevent that, you choose auto-run. It's exactly the same thing as parallel, but when an auto-run event starts, it does not allow the player to move at all, okay. Any other parallel or auto-run event occurs freely. It does not matter. They do not affect each other unless they create some resource conflicts. For example, they try to do the same thing, like you have two parallel events trying to move an event at the same time in different directions, and that will most likely cause a freeze. But other than that, if you have some simple parallel events, those won't do much trouble, okay. And parallel events and auto-run events can go on in between each other. Be very mindful of events if you want to control variables through events, that they will work so fast, they will change your variables constantly. If you want a parallel event to keep a switch open for you, mind that if you use an event, for example a touch event, that when the player touches that event, the switch that you are keeping active through your parallel event, it will be turned off by your action button, or uh, touch events, okay? But the action that you do through the action button or these two will only be once. So the parallel event will reopen that switch in this case, because it repeats itself again and again and again. So be very mindful how you use this, because they are much trickier than they look. It's not rocket science, but through testing you will see that there will be a lot of goofs. And I'm telling you this because I've got 1100 hours in RPG Maker, and yeah, what can I say? Having so many hours in it, I have discovered a lot of things, and I wouldn't mind telling people and sharing some of my knowledge so that they don't go through the same mistakes again. The image here is the picture that you can choose, preferably a 48 times 48 tile, because RPG Maker MV is the only one that uses this. The previous versions use 32 times 32 pictures. Options, these ones will be for events. They are the same as in here. We can select them from here as well. So walking animation, when your character is standing still or any other event is standing still, you can actually use this option, and when you use this option, it will trigger the 3 frames of animation that any character has. It will be left foot, stand, right foot, then stand, I think, left foot, stand, right foot, then again left foot, stand, right foot, okay? And it will keep repeating this as long as that event is still, okay? I mean, it doesn't move, okay? It is interesting in a way to animate the surrounding, okay? Stepping animation is actually what I was speaking of. Walking is used for the walking animation. If you don't tick it, your event will move as if it is well, it will ignore the movement animation, okay? Stepping will have the character move in place from one foot to the other, creating an interesting animation that allows you to make that idle character a bit more animated, okay, rather than just standing statue, okay? Direction fix is something that you can use in case you want your character to not turn in a certain direction. So it's a direction lock. The direction that your character is facing will be locked as long as you have direction fixed. So let's say it is good in case you want to mimic some ricochet, right? So you shoot a cannon or you shoot a gun and your character will be pushed backwards. If you have them move backwards, they will they will turn backwards, move that direction, and they will remain like that. So if you want them to just move backwards without turning around, you can choose this, and any direction they will go, they will keep facing their current direction. And through is it allows any event or the player, depending on how you designate it. These 4 actually work only for the current event, okay? If you create a parallel event and you use set movement route, you choose your event from here, which are noted here. You also read what you see here is either a name that I gave them, or in case you don't give them a name, it's called event 0 and its name, okay? It's the ID from here. And if you want to write in scripts or plugins, if you want to do yourself, it is in here when you write switches and variables, you don't type there 0001. For example, if I want to summon variable, I don't know, variable 6, you can do that swiftly by this v and you write its number here, for example 4. Okay, so what I did here is well, okay, so in this case I wrote the value of variable 554 is, well, the preview will always state it as 0 because the default value of variables in RPG Maker will always be 0. Good. Now to move on, there are other two types of events, and these are somewhat much simpler. So you have troop events. Okay, these ones are battle events. Similar to map bound events, these ones also have pages. Okay, so you can choose, but new page. In this case, these function the exact same way. However, they have a different functionality through this one. You can choose when to trigger these through these boxes. I won't be speaking about these now. I will speak about these at a certain later time. You can choose these to happen throughout the whole battle, or during a certain turn, or at a certain moment. For example, when the character that you took into account, when it is their turn to perform their action. If you choose turn, and I remember correctly, I think it triggers at the end of the turn actually, rather than the beginning. I haven't used battle events in a very long time because my game will mostly be focused on its visual novel part, and the RPG part will be focused on later on. The chapter I'm working on is going to be visual novel mostly, like 99%. I'm interested in adding some RPG stuff, but for the moment there is no plan for that. Now, there is a difference in between these ones, battle events, and the other ones. These ones are in the database. They are not bound to any map. They are actually bound to troops. The way you create enemies is through here. You give them a picture, you give them any stats that you want, you give them any skills that you want. More about these because these are very tricky. And then you can create troops by simply adding any number of enemies from here, and you put them simply in the picture anywhere you want. Okay, so you can put them, simply drag and drop. Okay, when you create more pages in here, however, they are read the opposite way compared to map bound events. They were read from the right to left. Battle events are read from the left to the right. Okay, good. Now the last type of event, and the most important ones in my opinion, are common events. Common events are events that allow you to call them. So these events again belong to the database. They are not bound to any map, and they will simply be called through any other simple event. So for example, in this case I created an event that will start a fight, and it will start a fight with any of the troops that I want, for example. Okay, and that's how you start a fight. One of the ways you can start a fight. So that's how you basically invoke, or well, let's say summon or call a battle event, and common events are called through this, and then you choose it from your name. Okay, and you choose it based on its name. It's nothing too intricate. Okay, common events are interesting that they can be called on any map. They are not map bound, and it is good to use them if you have repetitive functions. Okay, so they are similar in a way to design patterns in programming. So basically, if you have an RPG and your character finds a lot of chests, right, you can have the same animation for that. Okay, and you have an animation or also a sound, and or probably you don't need the animation because that will require that will require it to be cast on a certain square, so you can't do that. So basically you can put a sound, because you can play the sound anywhere and it's not map bound, right? You can play the sound and you can play a text. For example, you found some treasure, okay? And common events can actually become very intricate. They can be used in numerous ways. They can summon one another if you want. You can actually make an infinite loop with those if you want. You can have a common event summon another common event that will summon another common event, which summons the first common event, which will summon the second, and so on and so forth. Also note that if the common events get very lengthy, they will also require a bit to load, so they won't necessarily cause lag, but they can cause probably 1, 2, even 3 seconds of freeze, but usually it's around 1 second, okay, in most cases. Now depends if you want to make kilometers ahead. So for now this will be enough. I think I've spoken quite enough about the events. Other things that you would like, I can present them. Feel free to tell me, comment in the box below and tell me if you would be interested in more things about events, and I'll be more than happy to provide you with any possible you know, like, yeah, any possible information that I can provide. Okay, happy holidays, have a Merry Christmas, and also have a Happy New Year.